They say the truth defends itself, that if your heart is pure, if your motives are right, the world will see it eventually. But that's a lie, a dangerous one. The truth doesn't defend itself, people defend themselves. And the more they do, the weaker they look. Because here's the dark secret Machiavelli understood better than anyone. The moment you start explaining yourself, you've already surrendered the frame of power. You've stepped off your throne to argue with the crowd. He watched men in courts and kingdoms fall, not because they were wrong, but because they looked desperate to prove they were right. The powerful don't explain, they declare, they act. And their silence burns louder than 1,000 justifications. Think about it: when someone accuses you, attacks your reputation, questions your motives, what's the first instinct? To defend, to clear the air, to tell your side of the story. But defense is submission dressed as reason. You're accepting their premise that their opinion of you matters enough to deserve an answer. Machiavelli would smirk at that, because to him the mind of power plays a different game. When they accuse you, you don't fight the charge, you redirect it. You turn their blade not by blocking it, but by letting them stab at smoke. You deny them the satisfaction of reaction, and in that silence their certainty begins to rot. Here's the thing: people rarely remember who was right, they remember who looked in control. That's why silence is magnetic. It breeds tension. It forces others to fill the gaps you leave behind with their own assumptions, and assumptions are far easier to control than conversations. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he wasn't giving moral lessons. He was handing out weapons. He saw that in the war of perception, truth is irrelevant. What matters is appearance. He said, men judge more by the eyes than by the touch, meaning it's not what is true, but what seems true that shapes your fate. So when you defend yourself, you're doing something fatal. You're trying to be understood instead of being feared or respected or even doubted on your own terms. You're trying to win an argument in a world that only rewards dominance. Think about the last time you saw someone crumble under pressure: a politician, a celebrity, even a friend. The moment they start explaining, clarifying, backtracking, their power evaporates. Their words might be logical, even sincere, but the tone betrays them. You can smell the panic, the need for approval, the silent plea, please believe me, but belief can't be begged, it has to be imposed. And that's the Machiavellian truth: the more you defend yourself, the more you announce your weakness. The truly powerful don't chase understanding. They create it by acting as though their position is already justified. You see, defense is born from fear: fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing face, fear of rejection. But the moment you stop fearing misinterpretation, you become untouchable, because people can't manipulate a mind that doesn't need to be seen as right. There's a certain poetry in silence. When someone attacks you and you don't respond, it creates this void, a heavy, haunting pause. They start to doubt themselves. Maybe they were too harsh, maybe they missed something, or maybe you know something they don't. That's the real power, not reaction, but implication. Machiavelli understood that humans are storytellers. They crave patterns, causes, explanations. So when you withhold yours, they invent one, and the human ego, desperate to feel intelligent, often invents something in your favor. They assume you're calm because you're certain. They assume you're quiet because you're confident. You let their own mind become your advocate without saying a word. The weak rush to explain. The strong let time explain for them. But don't mistake silence for passivity. Silence is strategy. You use it like a knife: precise, intentional. Because silence alone isn't power, it's the posture behind the silence that gives it weight. You have to look like you could speak, but choose not to. You have to radiate the calm of someone who's seen the battlefield 100 times before and knows that panic never wins wars. When Caesar was accused of treason before the Roman Senate, he didn't launch into defense. He didn't argue about motives or plead for fairness. He walked to the center, tore open his tunic, and said, "If I've wronged Rome, strike me here." And the room went silent. Because in that moment, his gesture said everything words couldn't: that he wasn't afraid to die and therefore he couldn't be controlled. That's the trick. The appearance of calm indifference creates psychological superiority. It tells others you operate on a plane they can't touch, where validation doesn't exist, where attacks are background noise. Most people live in reaction. They're constantly explaining, defending, justifying. They live at the mercy of every whisper, but those who master the Machiavellian art of non-defense create an aura of mystery. And mystery is magnetic. It draws people in precisely because it refuses to explain itself. What this really means is power is a performance, not an act of deception, but an act of control over your own frame. When you're accused, insulted, misunderstood, you're being pulled into someone else's stage. The moment you respond, you step into their play. But if you remain centered, if you answer with action instead of words, you force them to perform in your theater. Every confrontation is a silent contest over whose frame defines reality. And Machiavelli knew that whoever keeps their composure wins. When someone provokes you, they're not seeking truth, they're seeking reaction. They want to feel they can make you move, make you explain, make you sweat. But the one who refuses to dance to that rhythm becomes the metronome instead, setting the pace, dictating the silence, forcing others to orbit their calm gravity. Here's something most people don't realize: defending yourself isn't about truth, it's about emotional control. The more you need others to understand you, the less power you have over yourself. The less you care about being misunderstood, the more your energy shifts from justification to action. You start to move differently, with a kind of detachment that unnerves people. They start asking questions. Why isn't he reacting? Does he know something? Is he that confident? Doubt becomes your shadow ally, and in that fog of uncertainty, your power multiplies. This is why Machiavelli said it's safer to be feared than loved, not because fear is cruelty, but because fear commands silence. People respect what they can't easily read. Love invites questions, explanations, vulnerability. Fear invites distance, and distance protects your influence. The art of not defending yourself isn't arrogance, it's discipline. It's learning to let people misunderstand you without losing sleep. It's choosing your dignity over your impulse. It's saying, you can think what you want, I'll still move how I choose. And here's the paradox: once you master that, people start defending you for you because they sense your strength. They fill in the blanks with respect. They build the myth you refuse to narrate. That's why the most commanding leaders, thinkers, and manipulators throughout history all shared one trait: a refusal to explain themselves. Their mystery became their weapon. Their silence became scripture. When Napoleon was accused of ambition beyond morality, he didn't deny it. He said, "Ambition is a crime only in the eyes of the unsuccessful." No defense, just dominant. A simple reframe that shifts the entire moral ground beneath the question. Because that's the essence of power. You don't answer accusations, you redefine the terms. The ones who master this, who stop defending and start reframing, walk through life like chess players among checkers. They see every accusation, every insult, every misunderstanding not as an attack, but as an invitation. A test of who controls the tempo. And that's where power lives, in the tempo. You can feel it in a conversation. Two people argue. One rushes to respond, tripping over words, desperate to be seen as right. The other listens, steady, unbothered, maybe even amused. The frantic one loses ground with every sentence, while the calm one gains it without saying a word. Because when you stay calm, the other person's emotions echo louder than your silence. You become the mirror they can't look away from. That's the invisible art Machiavelli hinted at. The art of using your opponent's energy against them, not through force, but through stillness. Because nothing destabilizes a person faster than realizing they can't shake you, that their words fall flat, that their anger doesn't register. It makes them feel small. And the human ego can't stand feeling small. So they scramble, they overreach, they expose themselves trying to restore control. And you just watch. But here's the thing: this isn't about apathy, it's about awareness. It's about understanding that most conflicts are emotional bait. When someone attacks you, they're trying to pull you into their storm. They want to see you spin with them. The moment you step inside, you've lost. Not because you're wrong, but because you've accepted chaos as the battlefield. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. He wrote that those who can command perception command the world. Because reality isn't built on facts, it's built on belief. You can win every argument logically and still lose socially, because people don't follow truth, they follow certainty. That's the secret behind every successful manipulator, every powerful leader, every quiet enigma who commands attention without effort. They project certainty. And certainty doesn't explain itself, it simply exists. It's the rock others cling to when their own confidence wavers. So never defend yourself, not because you owe no one an explanation, but because the act of defending itself destroys the illusion of certainty. Even if you're right, even if your cause is noble, the moment you start pleading your case, you step down from the pedestal and join the crowd. And the crowd never respects its own. Let's break it down deeper. When you defend yourself, you're fighting the surface battle. The accusation, the rumor, the misunderstanding. But beneath that is the real fight, the struggle for narrative dominance. And whoever defines the narrative owns reality. You don't win that war with logic, you win it with posture. When you stay calm in the face of chaos, you create a cognitive dissonance in others' minds. They expect you to react. When you don't, their brains start scrambling for a reason. Why isn't he angry? Why isn't she fighting back? Maybe they're stronger than I thought. And once that seed is planted, it grows in your favor without you lifting a finger. This is psychological warfare in its purest form. You're not fighting the person, you're fighting their perception. But it takes restraint, and restraint is the rarest form of strength. Anyone can talk, anyone can argue. It takes a kind of inner authority to sit in silence while someone misrepresents you and still know you've already won. Because if you truly understand power, you know that defending yourself is a waste of it. Power moves forward. It doesn't pause to explain. Imagine a lion in the wild. It doesn't roar to prove it's a lion. It roars because it feels like it. The sound itself is a declaration, not a defense. That's the energy you need. Stop trying to prove your worth. Move like someone who already knows it. Machiavelli once said that men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because if you strike, you must strike in a way that prevents retaliation. The same logic applies to your words. If you must respond, respond in a way that ends the discussion completely. A calm, sharp sentence that cuts through noise and leaves nothing to add, then falls silent again. That silence becomes a fortress. It tells the world you have nothing to prove, no urge to chase their understanding. You become self-contained, and self-contained people are dangerous. They can't be cornered because they've removed the weapon everyone else wields, the need to be validated. Most people live their entire lives imprisoned by that need. They shape their words, their choices, even their dreams around how others might perceive them. They defend their image so fiercely that they forget to build their substance. But those who stop defending start building something else: presence. Presence is the quiet gravitational pull of someone who doesn't explain themselves. You can feel it when they walk into a room. They don't speak first. They don't rush to fill silence. They let the silence announce them. It's the difference between someone trying to prove they belong and someone who knows they do. And here's the paradox. When you stop defending yourself, you actually become more believable. Because people subconsciously associate calm with truth. When you're defensive, your energy screams insecurity, even if your words are flawless. But when you're still, when you're unshaken, they assume you must know something they don't, that maybe you are in the right after all. It's the oldest manipulation trick in the world: appear so unconcerned that others begin to doubt their own aggression. There's a quiet genius in letting your enemies exhaust themselves. They'll try to provoke, to expose, to corner you. But they'll end up revealing their own obsession, their own weakness. Because people who can't stop talking about you are really showing how much you live in their head. So don't fight noise with noise. Let the noise devour itself. Think of history's most unshakable figures: Marcus Aurelius, Lincoln, even Stoics before them. They understood that control isn't about winning arguments. It's about choosing what deserves your words at all. Most battles don't. The strongest words are the ones never spoken. Because silence forces others to confront themselves. It's a mirror with no distortion. You throw their reflection back at them, and most people can't handle what they see. And once you realize this, you start seeing life differently. You stop being reactive. You stop caring about being liked. You start thinking in terms of leverage. Every situation, every attack, every misunderstanding becomes a tool. You stop playing defense and start setting traps. They accuse you, let them. They expect panic. Give them calm, they demand answers. Give them mystery, because mystery isn't weakness, it's power deferred. It's control disguised as indifference. In the political courts of Florence, Machiavelli watched rulers crumble not because of assassination or war, but because of the disease of explanation. The moment they started to justify themselves to the people, they became the people's equal. The aura of authority dissolved. He wrote that the prince must learn not to be loved for his goodness, but feared for his command of appearance. Because perception creates obedience, and obedience sustains order. So ask yourself this: when was the last time you defended yourself just to ease someone's discomfort? When was the last time you tried to prove your worth to someone who'd already made up their mind? Every time you do that, you bleed power. The trick isn't to stop caring, it's to stop seeking permission to exist as you are. Because that's what defending really is: a request for permission. Please see me as good. Please understand I meant well. Please don't think I'm wrong. And those pleas, no matter how politely spoken, are silent confessions of weakness. The truly powerful don't ask to be understood. They act in ways that make understanding irrelevant. They let results speak. They let time expose truth, and eventually it always does. Lies decay. Truth doesn't need to chase. That's the essence of Machiavelli's trick. Flip the frame by stepping outside it. Make your silence louder than their accusations. Make your confidence so unmoved that their words start to sound hysterical against your calm. Because power, real power, doesn't argue, it dictates through example. Here's the part most people never grasp: refusing to defend yourself isn't about silence for silence's sake. It's about control of attention, because attention is the real currency of power. Every time you defend yourself, you're paying attention to their frame, their narrative, their insecurities. You're feeding the illusion that their judgment matters more than your direction. But when you withhold attention, you starve them. And starving someone of your attention is the most painful rejection of all. That's why people chase conflict. It's not always because they hate you. Sometimes it's because conflict is the only way they can feel connected to you. They don't want resolution, they want your reaction, your energy, your focus. Machiavelli understood that perfectly. He studied human nature not as a philosopher, but as a surgeon. He saw that most people would rather be hated than ignored, because hatred still means relevance, but indifference is annihilation. So when you refuse to defend yourself, you're doing something far more devastating than winning the argument. You're erasing it. You're saying you don't even exist on my map of importance. And that right there flips the power instantly. It's a paradox, isn't it? The more you fight for your image, the more fragile it becomes. But the moment you stop fighting, it hardens into something untouchable. Because what can anyone take from a man who refuses to be defined by others? The world becomes quiet around that kind of person. You can feel it in rooms, the subtle shift when someone with self-possession walks in. Conversations slow, people watch. Because confidence without defense creates gravitational pull. It's not loud, not performative. It's that eerie calm that says, I don't need to prove I belong here. That's why Machiavelli's writings were so dangerous. He exposed how perception could be weaponized, how moral virtue was optional but control of image was essential. He saw that most humans confuse visibility with value, so if you withdraw your reaction, you become something rarer than admired, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is the shadow of power. You can't be manipulated if no one can predict how you'll respond. You can't be diminished if no one can tell what gets under your skin. The one who knows your triggers owns you. The one who hides them owns the world. So learn this art not of fake silence, but of deliberate ambiguity. Respond when it serves you, not when it soothes you. Because power isn't found in denial, it's found in direction. You're not refusing to speak because you're scared. You're refusing because you've already decided what matters, and this doesn't. The beauty of it is that people start projecting their own fears onto your silence. If they're guilty, they'll assume you're judging them. If they're insecure, they'll assume you're superior. Your stillness becomes a mirror that reflects everyone's own self-image back at them, distorted by their anxieties. You don't even need to move. Just be still long enough and the truth crawls out of others on its own. Here's what you'll notice once you stop defending yourself. People start treating your words differently. When you do speak, every sentence lands harder because scarcity creates weight. The less often you explain, the more powerful your explanations become when you choose to give them. It's the same principle leaders use. A king doesn't make daily announcements. A general doesn't justify every move. Their silence between decisions builds tension, and that tension breeds reverence. This is the energy Machiavelli admired. Cold, deliberate restraint that makes others lean in just to hear what you'll say next. And when you finally speak, the silence that preceded your words has already done half the persuasion for you. But don't mistake this for arrogance. The silence of arrogance says, you're beneath me. The silence of mastery says, I have no need to prove anything. One breeds resentment, the other breeds awe. The real transformation happens inside you when you stop living like your reputation is something to protect and start realizing it's something to command. The weak protect their name, the powerful build a myth, and myths don't defend themselves, they evolve. Once you see this, everything changes. The insults, the rumors, the misunderstandings, they stop feeling personal. You start viewing them as weather, noise in the distance, passing storms that can't touch the fortress you've built inside, because your calm becomes a kind of armor. The more you master it, the more people start adjusting themselves around you. You become the steady point they calibrate to. It's subtle, but you can feel it. Conversations begin to orbit your tempo. Their tone shifts. They match your stillness, your composure, your unspoken authority. And the best part, you don't need to win arguments anymore. The room starts aligning to you automatically. That's the Machiavellian trick, not manipulation through deceit, but through energy. The one who doesn't flinch controls the rhythm. Most people think dominance is loud. They imagine raised voices, strong opinions, grand gestures, but true dominance is quiet. It's not in the words, it's in the pacing. It's in knowing that silence can be louder than outrage. You'll start to see it everywhere once you understand it. In interviews, in politics, in relationships. Watch the ones who never rush to clarify, who let others interpret and misinterpret freely. They understand that every misunderstanding is a filter. It reveals who's perceptive and who's not. Why correct people when their assumptions expose their nature for you? That's how the truly strategic move. They don't waste time explaining themselves to fools. They let the fools disqualify themselves through their own projections. And over time, the world divides naturally around you. The shallow drift away because they can't get a rise out of you. The insightful draw closer because they sense your depth. Silence becomes the magnet that sorts people for you. But the hardest part, the real test, is emotional detachment. Because it's easy to preach calm, harder to feel it when your name is dragged, when your motives are twisted, when silence feels like surrender. That's where discipline comes in. The discipline to hold your ground when every instinct tells you to react. To remember that temporary discomfort is a small price for long-term power. Machiavelli would say, the appearance of virtue is more valuable than virtue itself. In modern terms, how you handle tension matters more than being right. Because perception writes history. So when tension rises, don't relieve it with words. Let it build. Let your silence stretch until others start to fold beneath it. Until they start second-guessing, backtracking, apologizing, or softening their tone. That's when you'll know your silence has become a weapon, and once you master that, you can use it anywhere. In negotiations, silence makes others speak more. In arguments, it forces reflection. In relationships, it reveals who respects your boundaries and who fears your absence. Power shifts not when you shout louder, but when you simply stop responding to noise. And that's the moment your world changes. You stop trying to be understood and you start being felt. People might not know exactly why you unsettle them or why your presence feels heavier than others, but they'll know not to cross you lightly. Because the truth is, explaining yourself is cheap. Everyone can do it. But commanding respect without a word, that's art. That's the power Machiavelli worshipped: control through composure, domination through calm, influence through absence. That's how empires were built, not through endless defense, but through unshakable direction. The prince never defended, he decided. And maybe that's what you're called to do: stop defending and start deciding. Decide how you'll be seen, not by convincing, but by embodying. Decide that silence isn't retreat, it's reign. Because once you realize that, you'll never feel cornered again. The world can accuse, misunderstand, or gossip, but you'll be somewhere above it all, unmoved, knowing that the longer they talk, the louder your silence becomes. Here's the truth most never face: you don't owe anyone your defense, you owe yourself your direction. Because defending yourself locks you in the past, explaining what's already been done, justifying what can't be undone. Direction, on the other hand, belongs to the future, its movement, its momentum. And momentum is how power survives. That's why Machiavelli warned princes not to waste words on justification. Words fade, results linger. If people question your motive, let your outcomes answer. If they doubt your character, let your silence show that their doubt is beneath your focus. You'll notice over time the noise fades while your presence deepens. Because people can attack what you say, but not what you are. You have to decide what kind of person you want to be in moments of accusation. Do you want to be the one pleading to be understood, or the one whose silence forces others to rethink their certainty? The world belongs to the latter, because understanding isn't given, it's earned through consistency, not explanation. And here's the thing: most people defend themselves not because they're guilty, but because they're insecure about being misjudged. They can't stand the gap between their truth and how others perceive them. But that gap, uncomfortable as it is where your strength is born. You have to learn to live inside it, to breathe inside misinterpretation without suffocating. Because when you can handle being misunderstood, no one can control you anymore. The power isn't in being right, it's in being unbothered. The truly powerful don't correct the record, they rewrite it by living long enough for history to catch up. They don't chase fairness, they embody inevitability. That's why the greatest revenge is always calm progress, not because it's moral, but because it's untouchable. The man who walks forward without defending himself becomes a moving target, impossible to hit, impossible to pin down. While others are busy dissecting your motives, you're already 3 steps ahead, shaping the next moment. That's the rhythm of power: quiet forward motion. Every second you spend defending yourself is a second stolen from creation. And make no mistake, that's the point of accusation: to drain your focus, to anchor you in doubt. But when you don't take the bait, something miraculous happens. You stay fluid. While they argue over the past, you keep building the future. You start to realize that defense is a trap disguised as virtue. Because the moment you defend, you validate the attacker's position as judge. You hand them the gavel and then try to convince them you're innocent. But they were never the judge, they were the distraction. That's what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that the prince must learn to act beyond morality when necessary. It wasn't a call to cruelty, it was a call to sovereignty. He meant, stop letting others define your moral stage. If you must play the villain in their story to remain the ruler in your own, so be it. That's the essence of psychological dominance, not tyranny, but freedom from reputation's leash. You don't need to be liked, you don't need to be understood, you only need to be clear. Clear on what you're building, clear on who you are, clear on who no longer deserves an explanation, because explanation dilutes energy. Every word you spend defending yourself is one less word spent shaping the world. And the irony: once you stop defending yourself, your actions start to speak louder than your critics ever could. You become the story they can't twist, because you've already moved past the chapter they're stuck reading. Watch any person who's truly powerful. They don't argue, they don't beg for belief. They just keep executing. Their silence is confidence wrapped in motion. You can feel it when they talk. There's no nervousness in their tone, no edge of apology. It's not arrogance, it's certainty. A calm conviction that what they're doing will speak for itself in time, and it always does, because the truth is timeless. It doesn't need a press release, it just waits. Machiavelli would tell you that truth doesn't die, it outlasts. It doesn't shout louder, it stands longer. The powerful know this. That's why they're comfortable being doubted in the present. They already trust what history will say. And that's your challenge. Can you hold your silence long enough for time to prove you right? Can you resist the desperate pull to explain, to prove, to correct? Can you walk through slander, misunderstanding, and false judgment with the posture of someone who already knows how it ends? Because that's what separates the reactive from the regal. The reactive argue, the regal endure, and endurance is magnetic. People start to wonder what gives you that calm. They sense something deeper, something ancient. That's why silence feels powerful. It reminds people of death, of mystery, of what they can't control. It's unsettling because it's pure. You don't need to shout to dominate. You just need to be silent long enough for others to hear their own noise. Think about that next time someone tries to provoke you. They'll throw words at you like stones, hoping to see you flinch. Don't give them that gift. Let them throw their stones into an ocean of your calm. Watch how quickly they run out of ammunition when you refuse to echo back. Because the one who speaks second always speaks from strength. The first voice is driven by emotion. The second voice, if it ever comes, is crafted from control, and control is power. Sometimes the most Machiavellian thing you can do isn't to outwit your enemies, it's to outlast them. Let them expose themselves while you say nothing. Let them burn their energy trying to pull you into noise. And when the smoke clears, you'll still be standing untouched while they've exhausted every weapon except silence, the one they never learned to use. So never defend yourself, not because you're above it, but because it's beneath your mission. Every accusation, every misunderstanding, every twist of your image is a test. Will you waste your time fighting shadows, or will you keep walking toward light? Machiavelli's trick wasn't deception, it was discipline. The discipline to let perception bend toward you instead of chasing it. The discipline to let time reveal what reaction would have ruined. And in the end, that's what true power really is: patience wearing the mask of mystery. Because power isn't about forcing others to see your truth. It's about standing so still in your truth that they eventually see it on their own. One day, the same people who doubted you will start quoting you. The same voices that mocked you will borrow your silence to sound wise. That's how it always goes. The misunderstood become the standard, the quiet become the reference point. You don't need to shout to be remembered, you just need to outlast the noise. So next time someone demands your defense, smile. Let them think they've caught you off guard. Let them talk, explain, accuse. While they burn themselves alive in their own certainty, you'll be watching, calm, distant, unflinching. Because what they'll never realize is this: your silence isn't submission, it's strategy. And strategy always wins, so stand there. Let the world misunderstand you, let them project, assume, gossip, and twist. You owe them nothing but the dignity of your stillness. Because if Machiavelli taught us anything, it's this: the moment you stop defending, the moment you stop reacting, you stop being their pawn, you become the player. And the player never explains the game, he just wins it.